Big news.
Mm-hmm. I know what you're going to say.
That has rocked the secular community with the announcement that Lawrence Krauss has been
a bad boy.
Yes, he's been a bad boy for a while now. And BuzzFeed wrote an article recently, published an article about it.
Yep.
So anyway, there are people taking sides on this.
Not unusual.
Yeah. So.
Right.
I don't know. It seems that there's a substantial number of people in atheist organizations out there who are unaware that these are not new allegations. It's not a rush to judgment.
Yeah.
This has been out there for a while. Most of the women in the atheist community have been aware of certain individuals who behave badly when given the opportunity, and they're warned about this. And Krauss's name has bubbled up from time to time as someone you need to keep an eye on.
Yep. So for me, it's been nice to be vindicated because you hear about these things, and I can't really talk, but when you see that, oh, he has actually been found guilty of doing some things and kicked out of 2 colleges, and I'm like, okay, all right, this is real. And so, and it's not just that. Go on.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, I don't have anything to add to the situation with Krauss. I think, I don't want to add anything on to what the BuzzFeed article wrote. I don't have any personal experience that I can contribute. What I want to bring up is how people approach things like this. And it was something, Tracie, you had published something on your Facebook page about people are treating it like, claiming that Jesus existed or something like that. And I actually had an interaction with someone on a friend's page who is basically saying the same thing. And I'll actually read the comment that she posted out there. It was in response to my pointing out that these allegations have been out there for a long time. It's not just one person. You've got multiple allegations. And she wrote, "It doesn't matter if 1 million people say they saw Jesus. I will reserve judgment until there's evidence. All claims would have to be investigated and vetted properly. Why have you abandoned what you preach? What is motivating you seriously? Is it personal, as in do you know these women personally? Something is seriously clouding your judgment." And she was writing this to me. And so there's a couple things on this. First of all, she's treating the claim that women are sexually harassed, groped, sometimes raped, as if they are as extraordinary as a claim that someone saw Jesus.
It's definitely not extraordinary.
And she's holding herself out as like the example of what a skeptic should be.
Yeah.
And this is not skepticism. This is denial of reality. I mean, and I'll have to look this up, but there's a guy out there that's actually done a mathematical analysis of the odds that a sexual assault or harassment claim is not true. And it's based on the information we have about, false claims. So the rate of false allegations is pretty low. It's about on par with other types of allegations. And, he's basically even applying a more generous standard to this, saying, let's assume that it's actually even more frequent than it is. Say, 10% are false. By that standard, if a man is accused of sexual assault or harassment or rape, the odds of him not being guilty are pretty low already. Doesn't mean that he's not entitled to, due process or whatever. And that's a legal standard, by the way. That's not what we have to go with as far as, how we make decisions about who to hang out with.
Right.
But if 2 women come forward and accuse him of the same thing, then the odds are astronomically low that he's completely innocent. And if multiple women come forward, it's a virtual certainty that the guy is not innocent of these things.
I wish statistics was required in high school so that everyone understood what it really means.
So, I mean, I get that people want to give people the benefit of the doubt, and especially if they're personally acquainted with someone, it's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But, I mean, really, the odds are low that these allegations are not true. And I wanted to bring this into context of something that I'm pretty familiar with. Back in the late 90s, the Army was confronting a series of sexual misconduct scandals, some of which involved drill sergeants and other people in positions of authority. And they opened this hotline. And so there were, like, the hotline was flooded with thousands of calls. Wow. Well, one of the calls that came through actually accused the sergeant major of the Army of sexual misconduct. And so the Army opened an investigation. He was actually relieved of duty while this investigation proceeded. In the course of the investigation, 5 more women came forward and accused him of similar things. And what was chilling about this whole thing was that these women didn't know each other. They met each other for the first time in the courtroom when this guy was court-martialed. Okay? In spite of that, they were interviewed by different criminal investigation investigators too. So it wasn't like the investigators got together and coached them into the same statements.
Right.
They all told remarkably similar stories about how he approached them and what he did.
That's very chilling.
And unfortunately, because of the rules in an Army court, each allegation had to stand on its own merits. And so they couldn't take 6 allegations that were remarkably similar and look at it and say, oh, there's a pattern here. You know, they couldn't do that statistical analysis and apply it to that case. So they had to look at only the evidence that applied to each case. And so he was acquitted of all of the sexual misconduct charges. The only thing they convicted him of was obstructing justice, because they had him on a recorded conversation with one of his accusers, and he was coaching her about what to say. So that it was basically suborning perjury. And that's what they got him on, was obstructing justice. And he was reduced in rank, and, you know, he had to retire and all that stuff.
So these women had to endure 2 traumas. First,
Right.
the actual physical trauma, and then the trauma of not having it acknowledged, which is a full-on other thing.
And they were, it was the standard stuff. They're sluts, they're whores, they came after him, they're lying, you know, all of the standard stuff. And in one of them, for one of them, there was an accusation that she's a lesbian, and that they were holding that over her head. And
well, I mean, at the time, that was probably an offense that get you kicked out, right?
yes, that would get her kicked
Yeah.
out. And in fact, she was a lesbian.
Right.
But that was the...
So it wasn't just a character assault. This was actually a coercive technique to
Exactly.
tell somebody, we can end your career.
And the thing is, that's another bit of coercion that was prevalent in the Army back in the days of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and even before then. It was what we call rape by coercion. You're going to do me, or I'm going to tell everybody you're gay.
Damn.
You know, and if they think you're a lesbian, you'll get kicked out. And so that was a threat that hung over the heads of a lot of women in the military.
Oh God, that's horrifying.
Oh, and the thing is, a lot of these predators actually did deliberately target women that were gay, because you could strike fear in the heart of a young gay woman if you're an E5 in a unit, and you know your first sergeant or you know a commander or something decides, hey,
Yeah.
you know, you're going to do this, and hey, do this, or I'm going to get you kicked out for being gay.
Yeah.
You know.
And that imbalance of power is part of why this Me Too movement has shaken the news and the population of the whole world, it seems, is because we are moving past that imbalance of power, or trying to. I feel like there's still definite problems. The women who are accusing are getting sued, and that's supposed to shut them up. But I know that I have experienced a lot of sexual harassment, and much of it was with an imbalance in power in play. And so, okay, I can blow the whistle on this person, but it will end my career.
Right.
Saying I have been sexually harassed or any other sort of thing that accuses a man of power of anything, it's not just as simple as coming forward.
Right.
And the other thing is, it's another level. When, in one instance, the harassment was, it was very clear that if I wanted a particular job, that I was going to have to do something that I didn't want to do.
Right.
And in the field where I was,
And not work related.
right? Yeah, not so much.
Yeah.
Not show me your publications.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. So it was very clear that was what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
And in the field I was in, jobs were they were like hen's teeth.
Yeah.
There goes that job.
Yep.
There goes that job. It affected my career so many times.
I actually want to mention something. I was contacted by somebody maybe a month or two ago, who wanted some clarification on a question that really kind of surprised me. I'm going to change it up a bit because I don't want to give any details that they may have discussed this with some other people, and I don't want to give their identity away. But let's just say, for example, that I'm a Hollywood movie producer, and people come to me with their scripts and they want them made into movies. Their question amounted to, what would be wrong with me saying you have to smoke my pole to get your script made into a movie? And if people are willing to do it, then why isn't that okay? And I said,
Somebody said that really for
yeah.
real?
They
What?
basically said that this is not a person who is, required to make your script into a movie, and so what's the harm in them demanding whatever they want? Because you can just take your script somewhere else, right? You don't need to take it here.
My God.
And I was trying to explain to them that this is a coercive thing, that you can't hold somebody's career opportunities over their head to basically, number one, they have the fear that what if I walk out of here and then my reputation gets ruined? What if they go talk to other producers and, this is somebody that could not just deny me an opportunity, but could do damage to my career. And I don't know that they wouldn't, because clearly they're not ethical.
Right.
And you also have the issue of how badly does this person they're talking to, need this opportunity? How badly would they want this opportunity? And this is not, it shows, like, to me, a real disregard for consent, right? Because consent, I remember I read a really great article that was written by a sexual consent educator. And it was probably one of the most, level-headed, objective pieces that I read after the Aziz Ansari stuff came out. There was a lot of, angry rhetoric on both sides of this thing. People were very volatile and emotional about it, understandably. But there was a piece that I read that was published, I think, on Vox, and one of the things that she mentioned was just the idea of consent and regard for consent. One of the things she said was, because a decent person only wants to have sex and sexual relations with people who want that, right? You don't want to have sex with people that don't want to have sex with you, or force yourself onto people if you're, a decent person.
Yeah.
So the idea that you're literally trying to coerce sex, use your power, use what you have in order to coerce sexuality out of somebody is like a huge violation of a person and their body. And so the problem that I had, and this was what's an interesting thing when you're talking about your experience, Claire, of your workplace and how the impact this has had, and whether or not you're denied opportunities because of this. This is such a weird thing, but to me there's kind of this weird overarching theme that goes out beyond even the issue of sexuality, to people not understanding what it means to have power over somebody else in a workplace. And one of the things that was interesting to me is that in the last week or two, there have been a whole lot of headlines that have started coming out about Jared Kushner and things that have happened politically with certain countries that he's been involved with versus things that he's been involved with from a business standpoint that also seem to include these countries.
Right.
How odd.
Well, the question comes up, right? When you have a person that's got 1 million business dealings and they've got 1 million, global things that they're involved in, how could this not come up, right? I mean, you're going to have this crossover. Even if it isn't related, even if I'm not sanctioning some country because they didn't do a deal with me, it's going to look that way.
If only we could have foreseen this problem.
Right. And so when I'm reading this, I'm reading the back and forth, and people are saying, well, this is this is two things don't have anything to do with each other, and they're not. And I'm sitting here looking at it, and I'm saying, this is why we have divestment requirements and policies around public office, especially higher public office, where you have global decisions that you're making. When you're involved in a global company, it is never more important that you divest yourself of those interests, because this is the problem. You end up in situations where there's this big mess of overlap, and all the people watching are saying, are you using your position unethically, or are you not? And how do we know that you are or you aren't? And here's the thing for me. If I'm the company that is in a country that is having some issue, and I go into your office and you say to me, hey, how about we talk about this loan thing? How do I feel as far as turning you down for that, right? Or how do I feel about, my capacity to say no to a thing? And so when this person is talking about the idea of, well, people might be into this, somebody might be willing to do a thing like that and okay with it, and it's not a problem, and then they get this benefit, and that's totally fine with them. And I'm thinking to myself, you have just reached like the farthest boundaries of reasonable scenarios to try and justify abusing somebody in an employment situation or in a employment opportunity situation where this is not the norm. This is not the person we're talking about. When somebody is asked for sexual favors for promotion or for job opportunities or for employment, this is not mostly people who are totally cool having sex with somebody for a job.
Date.
And there's this 1 in a million person who feels like they've been abused. It's in a general term. I'm not saying that we can rule out that there is this person who is like, gee, my goal is to sleep my way to the top. But I'm going to say that it's pretty safe bet that if somebody's asking you for sex in the workplace, let's say that you've got a Jared Kushner situation where the person just thinks that you're attractive and they wouldn't ever dream of penalizing you professionally for this. When they're above you, you don't know that. You don't know that this offer is on the up and up. You don't know that there are not going to be repercussions if you say no. And this is why a person with power, like a conference speaker or a boss or a person who has job opportunities that they can allow or deny to somebody else, they need to have those boundaries in place so that you don't abuse people. Because even if you are like the nicest person in the world who would never dream of doing such a thing, when you throw that offer down, the person on the receiving end is saying, is this what I think it is?
Right.
And you don't know if when they agree, there's no way to know if they're agreeing because, hey, I'm cool with this, which is probably not the case, or if they're agreeing to this because they feel like they don't have a choice.
Which is, and that's why in the military, those prohibitions on relationships between people of different ranks in certain circumstances is absolutely prohibited.
Right.
So if like, I'm a battalion commander, I can't date anybody in my battalion.
Of course not.
That they all in some way report to me. If I'm a brigade commander, well, now I can't date anybody in the brigade. If I'm a battalion commander and I want to date the XO of a neighboring battalion, no problem. That XO is a major, I'm a lieutenant colonel. There's still no problem,
Right.
even though there's a rank difference, because I don't have anything to say about her career or what happens to her after that.
Well, and I just want to point out, too, because I threw in the conference speaker in there. I'm sorry, did you have more to say?
Well, in the situation like where you have people in a basic training company, trainees, they're off limits to everybody. Anybody permanent party, any drill sergeant, anybody there that is not a trainee, you cannot date a trainee because everybody has authority over them.
Yeah, you just don't. It's not about whether you mean it to be coercive or not. It's about the fact that the person on the receiving end can't know.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what you're saying. They don't know. They don't know what the answer is to this question, and they should not be put in that situation.
And not only that, but if let's say I'm a drill sergeant and I see a trainee that I think is really cute and I would like to date her. even if she consented, how could I ever know?
Right.
How could I
You
ever
can't.
know? You know, and she can't ever know that was actually, you know, something she had complete control over, that she could say no.
Right.
And so that's why it is
Because what happens if it starts out, you know, really nice and everybody's in agreement, everything is fine, and then she decides she wants to go date somebody else, and then you turn crazy?
yeah.
Or, sorry, that's an ableist slur. No, I mean, I'm trying to do
right,
better.
right.
So let me
Got
just
it.
say you turn punitive.
Right.
Toward this person.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I like. I want to say, I like that about the ableist thing because it makes me think more about my vocabulary.
Right.
Yeah.
And I
like it
appreciate
too.
that.
I do too.
So,
yeah, so if I decide to retaliate against her, I mean, and that's a real possibility. You never know when people, you know, get involved, how
right.
things are going to work out, you know?
Because how many people seem really charming and then you try to leave and suddenly you have a
Yeah.
stalker.
Oh boy. Oh,
Yeah.
So, but the thing about the conference speaker, I just want to bring this up real quickly because it's a little bit of a different dynamic in that there probably isn't like that denial of something to you, right? Like, for example, the conference speaker, you're very impressed. You go, but I am not, even though I've spoken in a few places, I'm not really like the commanding conference speaker. Nobody's, you know, banging down my door, and I am not going to be the headliner at any conference anytime soon. But even I have seen enough of the people who like what I do to recognize how easily I could take advantage of these people, because there are folks who don't really have what I would call a realistic perspective of who I am, like you're talking about earlier. I don't know if it was if we got this on the air, if it was pre-show, but you were talking about putting people on pedestals, Jen.
Yes.
And when a person is doing that to you and you're aware of it, to me, it's egregious to take advantage of that.
Right.
And as the person that's speaking and a person who's doing TAE, when I'm talking to people, I actually kind of make an effort to not even, I don't really even look when I'm looking at dating or something. I kind of look outside the community because I prefer people that don't know me, don't have any concept of what I do and any of that, because I don't want to have that kind of influence over anybody. And I don't want to be objectified in that way. You know, so from a personal selfish level, I don't like being treated like that because I'm not the thing, right? I'm the person that you don't know that you're, you know, objectifying into something else that you see. And so it's kind of offensive to me on a personal level. But then on a level of other people, I look at that as I have a high capacity to abuse people, and I'm not even powerful. Right? I'm not even like a powerful person within the community. And I could take advantage of and abuse people if I wanted to. I could be out there, like, you know, soliciting all kinds of things from people if I wanted to. And I try to be very careful about that.
So let me see if I have this straight. A person of privilege should show empathy and awareness of their privilege.
Yeah.
And sometimes people aren't aware of it. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I'm not saying like this is necessarily an evil person, but yeah, they to just know that this person who even might be throwing themselves at you may not have the capacity to really understand who you are and what's going on in the situation. I mean, to them, you're like almost iconic in some ways. And if I get this, right, if I get this from people, I know that somebody who's like a headliner is got to be just, you know, swamped in this stuff. And I'm not saying that you can never find a peer, you know, and I'm not saying that anybody's wrong for dating within the community. And I mean, there are definitely people that can go peer to peer with you, and they don't have to necessarily be famous people, right? But you've got to be careful.
Which that kind of highlights to the responsibility of the conference organizers and larger organizations to exercise some oversight of what people are doing socially. And when you recognize that someone either is unaware that they could abuse people or is actually taking advantage of people,
I mean,
they need to step in and say, look, we see what you're doing. I see you.
I've seen situations, though, and I just want to bring this. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think that, but I think I've seen people that I actually like and regard who don't realize what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes a person who has not had attention that starts to get all this attention can themselves be kind of overwhelmed by it. Like
Right.
suddenly people are sexually interested in me just because I showed up here and they've seen my face, and what's wrong if I and they're not used to this, right? So they look at it almost like they're kind of naively overwhelmed, even though they're on the power side of it. So it's kind
Right.
of like what Clare is saying. There's a need for almost education in this area where people understand that you can't do this to people who don't. When someone doesn't know who they're not looking at you right. They're not seeing you clearly.
And that's what I was saying. I think the organizations and conference organizers have a responsibility, not only to the conference goers and the people who might be abused,
Right.
but also to the speakers who may not be aware of just how much influence they can exert
you
on
have
someone.
to tread super lightly.
Yeah.
Super lightly.
And especially, like you said, if it's someone that's relatively new to this kind of attention, they may not realize that it's really easy to make a mistake in this context and to violate consent or.
I'm going to throw it down. I think it's safe that nobody can identify somebody from this because it was a one-on-one conversation I had with somebody. They may recognize themselves, but hey, no one else knows who you are. But so someone had intention of meeting somebody at a conference, right? So they had an ongoing kind of back dialogue with someone, and it was like, hey, they're going to be there, I'm going to be there, we're going to hook up, whatever. That's fine. You've got your thing going on. I ran into someone. They were going to meet us, and I ran, and somebody shows up, and it's just full on fan person, right? Full on fan person, and I thought, oh no, like tell me this is not the person that you're like baiting in here, because this is so wrong.
Yeah.
And so later, the person showed up, and it wasn't the person I thought it was. And I was just like, good. So,
my God.
So the person shows up, and they have a lot more, they're with it a little bit more. They're seeing things more clearly. They're more reasonable, and so later I kind of, as a sideline, mentioned to my colleague at the time, I was like, hey, when I saw that other person show up, I thought maybe that was them. And I was like, whoa. And they said to me, well, I would have gone with that one too.
Oh,
Whoa.
Right. So and at that point I was like, I think this is when I need to just stop talking, because I have a whole different philosophy on this.
Oh, yeah.
Right. To me, the two of them were night and day. One was
Yeah.
a complete no,
Yeah.
not even. It's like a groupie almost, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that's taking advantage of somebody.
Yeah. It is taking advantage. It completely is. Even if that groupie is collecting, so to speak, like I'm going to collect that famous person and that famous person and that famous. No.
Right.
It's still.
Well, to me, I mean, I don't want to be that notch on somebody's bedpost.
Right.
Well, that goes back to the
that's
objectivism, and that's funny that was what I was thinking. Like I
you
said,
have more ethics than
right.
Yeah,
No,
I
what I think what Jen is saying is she has more self-esteem, right? So the idea is, I don't want to have sex with somebody who is only there with me because they don't really know who I am.
Right.
Right. So in other words,
Exactly.
You're having sex with
they
this
have
fantasy.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a one-nighter with someone who doesn't know who you are, and you're both just doing the one-night thing. But when somebody is there and they're basically treating you like something you're not,
Right.
and they want to be with you because they have an objectified image of you that's not real, and you say, yeah, sure, you're basically just saying, you might as well just take I am a human being and crumple it up and throw it in the wastebasket, right? Because you're not anymore, right? You're basically saying you don't have to treat me like a human.
Yeah.
And that's the part of it that it kind of makes me angry. The other part, I just feel sorry for the person, and I wish they would. When I see people like this, I wish they would feel more self-esteem themselves. Like I don't like the fact that someone looks
Right.
up to me. I don't like the fact that we've talked about this hero worship kind of thing, and it's like I want that person. I wish that everybody could be peer-to-peer. I wish that everybody who met me would feel like a peer and respect themselves like a peer, and not think of me as better than them or think of anyone as better than them. And so I feel bad when I see the person who's very fawning, because it just makes me feel like I wish you knew that you don't have to see other people as better than you. But I also look at what that says about me, and I know they don't know me, because if they got to know me more, and there ever was like that moment, they would be like, I remember a time when I was like, a fan or whatever. And it's like, no, the more you know a person as a person, and you can get past that image that you built before you met them at all, the more I think you lose that sort of veneer of worship.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I know when I was younger, I had that sort of putting people on a pedestal. Like I put my grad school advisor on a pedestal. In ways, he's still up there because and he's dead now. He died just before I finished my PhD. But as I get older and wiser,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense to do that.
Because when we're younger, I mean, just real quickly, when we're younger, we're building our identities. And so we are looking to other people to see, like, what things do we admire in other people in order to incorporate into ourselves? What kind of person do I want to be is a question that at some point each of us has to ask ourselves. We're not born the person we want to be. We have to become that person. And so as we go through the job of becoming, there should hit a point where you are pretty well integrated as a human being and where you feel good about where you're at and where you become the person you admire. And then there's you and other people and you're all on an equal plane. And to me, that's sort of, you know, when people don't achieve that, when they get caught in that area of identity development and they never really become the person, I want people to become the person that they admire.
Exactly.
So that they don't have to admire other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And just be really comfortable in your own skin, happy with who you are. It took me, you know, I'm 52, and it took me a while to get here. And I've said often, I really wish for the Vulcan transfer of energy thing, because I wish I'd had all this knowledge back a long time ago and done stupid things and all that, but it just doesn't work that way. And so my point is that if you are that older, wiser person, not taking responsibility for the person who isn't at least wise, sometimes older people are still not wise, then I see that as incredibly unethical.
Yeah.
That's just...
It is. And I guess the only caveat, the only little asterisk I would put is that sometimes it's just ignorant. Sometimes it really is the person doesn't know what it is they're doing. And I think that's what Jen is saying. That's why you have to craft policies that help people who aren't aware of the damage they could do to somebody.
And